All right, family. I got some people with me. Got some guests from the Moorish Science Temple of America who will be speaking to us about Moorish science as a whole. I got my brother Chris on the line, and I have his Grand Sheik on the line as well. Peace in Islam to both of you brothers.
Sir,
Islam, peace.
peace.
All right, so let's just get started with the basics, right? What is Moorish science? How would you define or describe what Moorish science is?
Chris, go ahead.
All right. Well, first I want to rise and give praise to the great God, Allah. He's known as many different names, but He's the causeless cause, the rootless root from which all things have grown. I give honor to His most illustrious prophet, Prophet Noble Ali. I give honors to all true and divine prophets. I give honors to the forerunner of the prophet, Brother Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And I give honors to everything pertaining to Islam. I give honors to my brother Lawrence, who I known for many years, and had the fortune to be able to go to school with at Hampton University. And I give honors to everyone who may listen to this segment in this program. I give honors to my Grand Sheik, Brother SNL Bay. I give honors to everyone assembled here, and I give honors to man, he honors his father, God Allah. Um, it's That's an interesting, question to start it off with, because you're thinking about the basics, and I have to focus on Prophet Noble Ali, who taught the Moorish Americans their nationality and their divine creed. The people who were enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade, who were stripped of their nationality and given the names Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians, or African Americans today. Which the Prophet Noble Ali is responsible for restoring our cultural heritage, which we know that through the atrocities and of chattel slavery was taken away from us, and the mental slavery he addressed was bringing us back into the state of mind of our forefathers, which through Moorish science, which the body of study of the ancient Moabites who were of the land of Canaan and descendants of the ancient Moroccans from northwestern, southwestern shores of Africa across the Atlantic Ocean onto the northwest, southwestern shores um, of America and the Atlantis Islands. So when he brings back our old world narrative from where our forefathers' thought patterns were with our nationality, which is Moorish American, and our creed, which is Islam, and our religion, Islamism, the distinctive practice of peace. Peace.
Peace. Great answer. Can I add to that briefly?
Absolutely.
Not much to add to that. I mean, and I want to first, rise and give praise to the great God Allah, the author, the governor of the world's almighty, eternal, and incomprehensible. I want to give honors to the last prophet in these days and times, specifically sent to the fallen Asiatic sons and daughters of North America who've been labeled and misnamed Negro, Black, Colored, African American, etc. And his name is Prophet Noble Ali. I want to give honors to this podcast and to Brother Lawrence, give honors to my assistant Grand Sheik and my brother and comrade, Brother Simon Stanto-Il, give honors to everyone listening. I'm going to actually borrow a statement that my assistant Grand Sheik, Brother Simon Stanto-Il, said, and to relate to the question, the core base part of Moorish science is the science or the study of ourselves. In this particular case, the study of the true identity of the people that have been mislabeled and misnamed Negro, Black, Colored, African American, etc. Okay, and so to borrow again something that he had said earlier, right? When you're connecting two pieces of rope, you don't connect one end to the middle of the rope. You connect it to the point where it broke. So the Moorish Science Temple of America addresses the hidden mystery of how our people came to this condition. The reason why this is such an issue is because we are in 2022, And our people largely are still identifying ourselves by a former condition of servitude. Everybody else on the planet identifies themselves by national origin. People come from places. People don't come from conditions. You see what I'm saying? And so, but there's a big mystery as to what happened to our people. And this is what, all the way to 2022, keeps us in a state of social servitude. So, for us to fully contribute to the American experience, we have to be able to say where we're from, not necessarily not from a land or natural geographic perspective, because people move around. There's migration. It's what people, what political community did we come from prior to being labeled, what we were labeled post-slavery. You see what I'm saying? And so the organization and the teachings of Prophet Noble Drew Ali trace back and speak to these very issues. During the time of the trafficking transatlantic slave trade, all of Northwest and West Africa was controlled by a political entity called the Moroccan Empire. In modern scholarly language, they'll refer to it as the Islamic Empire. The fact of the matter is that Spain, most of Europe, and North Africa, the Mediterranean, and West Africa were all controlled by this political entity, the Moroccan Empire, regardless of tribe, regardless of, village, etc. You see? So, another piece of history. A lot of people don't know this. There was an actual document that heralded the beginning of the African transatlantic slave trade. It was a papal bull or an order from Pope Eugene IV given in 1442. The name of it was called the Ilius Cue, right? And it authorized the Portuguese military Christian order of Mary and Christ to begin raids on the west coast of Africa. And it was literally called a new crusade against the Moors. So when Prophet Noble Drew Ali said, why are we Moorish Americans? Answer, because we are descendants of Moroccans and born in America. You see the power that brings. Our issues today don't come from residue from slavery. They come from identity crisis.
Peace. That's so profound. Considering that many of us recognize and identify as African people, so-called African people, we have an understanding that we come from Western Africa. Most of us, if we dig deeper, we know that even through the transatlantic slave trade, that there were Africans from Central Africa and South Africa that was traded along that same trade. But you had to go. You mainly went through the West African borders, mainly in the ports of Ghana and et cetera, right?
This is correct.
And so for a lot of people, when they hear the word, well, first off, a lot of people still don't even know the term Moor. I'm fortunate enough to have met people like Brother Chris, and coming from New Jersey, you know how the East Coast is. We got a little bit of everybody, Nation of Islam, 5%ers, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm fortunate enough to be exposed to such terminology. But a lot of people, they don't know the term Moor. And so they don't even understand the connection between Morocco. One of the main questions that I hear is there still a connection between the Moors in America and what is considered Morocco today? And before you answer that, let me also make it clear, I guess, for the people, that the Morocco you see today is a byproduct of the post-Atlantic slave trade. These borders were created by the Europeans. These borders were not created by our people. And so I want to make sure our people understand that what they call Morocco today is a remnant of what Morocco was back in the day. But if one of you can answer that question, is there still, I guess, even a political connection between the Moors in America and what we call Morocco today?
The short answer to that is yes, absolutely. There have been a number of interactions from the time of Prophet Noble Drew Ali all the way up into the 80s and the 90s between the government of Morocco and the Moorish Science Temple of America. So that the short answer is yes. You bring up a big point though that is, I think, is very important, and that is, we are looking, many of our people are so polarized when we see Africa. First and foremost, we are not an anti-African movement. Prophet Noble Drew Ali said that among the descendants of the inhabitants of Africa, there's still much wisdom to be learned. And he's talking about us. We are the descendants of African inhabitants. But notice the wording, African inhabitants. Why is that important? Because there's 54 nations on that continent. You don't just go to Africa. You see what I'm saying? And so that's another thing, another missing part of our people's education. So when we say African American, it's not a derogatory or a direct derogatory like Negro and Black, but it is culturally ambiguous. See, if you ask somebody their nationality, they say Italian, there's a whole lot that comes with that because they're not talking about a land mass. They're talking about a political community with culture and history. You see? And so that's important. And if we were just to say, and I just want to throw this out there, and then I'll pass the mic to the brother. If we were to really analyze the term African American, that means the movie star, the European movie star Charlize Theron would be African American. She was born in South Africa and immigrated to America. See how that works?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
It's you know, thinking about the intersectionality of understanding who our forefathers are and looking at our connection and relationship with current present day Morocco, you know, those are our brothers and sisters.
That's right.
We look at the state of Morocco getting its independence in 1956 and their colonial experience. And then we look at our colonial experience here in America, where Prophet Noble Drew Ali founded the Moorish Science Temple of America in 1913 AD in Newark, New Jersey. And he was teaching out the Holy Bible. And it's interesting because when you asked about Moorish science, and we think about who the ancient Moabites are and who the Moorish are, the founders of the holy city of Mecca and the land of Canaan. And with Grand Sheikh was explaining how, you know, with Prophet Noble Drew Ali taught us that the inhabitants of Africa are the descendants of the ancient Canaanites from the land of Canaan. And that's our storyline. He gave us back our narrative with who we are and who, you know, who our forefathers are. And then our state of mind with that is connected to Jesus and who Jesus was, being a descendant of the ancient Canaanite and Moabite. So, you know, and then this is where we can see ourselves within what we've been studying, where the Prophet Noble Drew Ali brought to us not only our nationality, but the 18 missing years of the life works of Jesus in India, Europe, and Africa. Right. So, you know, so that he told us that was missing from our Holy Bible. So, you know, a lot of, you know, the misunderstanding and misconceptions where, you know, with Islam in America come from a lot of Islamophobia and, you know, misunderstandings because they think that the way people practice Islam in Morocco or Algiers or Tunis or Saudi Arabia or somewhere in the East, it looks different from the way it's practiced here in the West in America. And I say this to say because it's an interesting connection is, you know, Islam is a universal thought, a universal religion where, you know, the Prophet told us it's like the air, it's enough space, enough for all to fit in. So, you know, we think about the universal and knowing that we are all brothers and sisters, we're connected. And he taught us how. And he brought us back to our divine origin. Peace.
Peace. Can I touch on Brother Lawrence really quick?
Absolutely.
Brother Monsanto brought up a powerful point as it relates to West Africa, right? When he said, Prophet Noble Drew Ali said that the Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites whom inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. But wait a minute, aren't Moabites a Semitic people? Aren't Moabites, you know, what we would call Afro-Asiatic? You know, aren't the Moabites, you know that this coming from an area that is now called, you know, not the Levant, but like Southern Arabia? Why would he say that the Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites who inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa? That's interesting, right? Now, what you have with the European or the Euro revisionist narrative on sociology and anthropology is that, okay, Middle East is over here. Egypt is not even a part of Africa for some reason. North Africa is not even either. And so you people that we call Negroes only come from sub-Saharan Africa. That comes from what's called the Hamitic hypothesis. And that was invented to try to explain how a people that the Europeans said were incapable of civilization built great civilizations. So they said, oh, it wasn't Africans that did that. It wasn't Negroes that did that. It was pastoral Europeans. It was dark-skinned Caucasians. It was anything but us, right? The fact of the matter is that if you do on-the-ground anthropological work in West Africa, if you go to present-day Ghana, you go to present-day Nigeria, you go to Cameroon, these people will call themselves, or they'll say, we are descendants of Kanana. That's what they say it. They say, no, we're the result of thousands of years of migration between the area of Southern Arabia, across the Red Sea, over the Horn of East Africa, and up through the Levant, back and forth for thousands of years. You see what I'm saying? So they tell you themselves, but who, it's just like, cowboys don't want to listen to the Indians telling the story about the cowboys and Indians. So it's like Brother C. Monsanto just said, it's narrative. The prophet gave us back our own narrative, which is the true historical narrative. The West Africans are an Afro-Asiatic people.
Islam. And, I appreciate that because, my background is Christian. And to be clear, right, I believe in the Messiah, the one whom we call Jesus. I do not subscribe to the Western practices of Christianity as it's been taught amongst Europeans and our people to enslave us and keep us in bondage. And what attracts me most to Moorish science is the fact that all science that is of truth, right, and exact is considered Islam and Moorish science. There's a lot of places I can go, and I don't want to lose my audience, but I do want to ask this question. Hopefully it'll help build them up to a higher consciousness. You guys say Islam and Islamism. Now, I did an interview with one of my brothers who is part of the Nation of Islam. Shout out to my boy Mark, a great brother of mine, right? And he gave high honors to the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. I believe they teach that it was the Prophet Noble Drew Ali who brought Islam to the Western world. And so he was not apologetic about that whatsoever. And so I recognize that I was even surprised to hear that. I kind of knew that, but most people don't talk about that publicly, right? And so when we talk about Islam versus Islamism, is there a difference, and what is that difference?
You want to take that one, brother?
Islam. Islam simply means peace. When you think about the Islam, the practice of. So, when we're with peace in action, we're practicing peace. Just like we were in the state of mind of our forefathers in the garden. We went back to the land of Canaan. We could create a heaven for ourselves right here on earth. See, this is where, the teachings of Prophet Noble Drew Ali, these are teachings that he gave us a masterpiece of work to work with, to work on ourselves. He taught us about our higher self and our lower self. So when we think about Islamism and what we're practicing, it's different. It looks different. People would say, well, why you don't do this? Because they try to hold you to customary things and put you into a box of what people think Islam is taught about. Because it's interesting, like if you go into a textbook for schools and you look through global studies, a lot of times they'll call them Islamic empires.
That's right.
So you're describing a people by their religion, where Islam in China looks different from Islam in Saudi Arabia. Islam, cultural custom, it doesn't look the same in West Africa like it did in Shanghai, Mali, empires. So, they'll say, well, why are they doing this custom? Oh, nah. They get spooked out over things that are customary, and we're taught that custom cannot alter the nature of truth.
That's a fact.
That's powerful.
Peace.
That's a fact. So I'd like to jump in with that one on that too. First of all, his answer was perfect. Yeah. The difference, simply put, between Islam and Islamism, Islam is a state of being. We say that heaven is a state of mind. It's not a place of meets and bounds, not a country to be reached. right? And so Islam means peace. It means oneness. It means the resolution of opposites, right? And so Islam is the heaven, right? Religion is the means to get to it.
Got
So
it.
that's why we say Islamism is our religion. Our goal is Islam. The Prophet said, we the fallen, he said, we the Moorish Americans are returning to Islam. How are we returning to Islam? That state of mind? Through the practice. And the practice is Islamism.
I understand. You also brought up something that I think is profound about the Moabites that resided in or inhabited West Africa, actually. And historically speaking, at least, well, let me say this: in my background, since I come from a Christian theological background,
Yes.
have done some studies in the Hebrew history, and I've learned, I think it was the Elijah Muhammad who talked about how you can get the truth from the devil if you learn how to read between the lines, right? And so when I studied the Hebrew history, and you learn about when Babylon and Persia and all the Assyrians took over, many of those inhabitants of what would be considered the Middle East, which is really Africa, just whatever,
Correct.
they migrated to the northern and western parts of Africa and assimilated with the people in the northern and western parts of Africa. And so a lot of these African tribes have adopted these forms of Hebrewism, if you will, or whatever term they want to use, but the practices that were there in the Promised Land, in Mecca and in Jerusalem, they were also practiced in West Africa. And so you see a lot of common customs amongst the North African and the West Africans being very similar to that of the so-called Hebrew religion and Islam, because they were all one people in thought and in practice.
To your point, brother, there's been extensive research, and there's an actual public documentary on YouTube about this one European researcher and anthropologist who's also, Jewish, right? Who was in researching the Lemba tribe in Southwest Africa, the Lemba tribe, and was intrigued by their very, very old but very authentic Hebrewisms. Culturally and religiously. He was like, wow, how did you get this? And initially they were like, well, maybe some Jewish traveler traveled there and taught these poor Africans, until they did blood tests. They did blood tests. Not only did they say, wait a minute, these guys carry, they carry genetic haplotypes that are almost exclusively what we would call Hebrew, but even better than that, brother. Modern, or the mainstream Christianity, and even to some degree mainstream Judaism, will say that the priestly tribe, the priestly lineage that comes from Aaron, right? The Kohanes, so to speak, right? Oh well, we lost the records during when Rome destroyed Jerusalem in AD 70, so we can no longer trace that line. Oh no. Those people, the Lemba tribe, are that line. They are the Levi tribe, which they actually say proudly, but the bloodline demonstrates.
That's powerful. I did not know that, so I'll definitely be checking out that documentary on YouTube.
Yes,
because
sir.
that is powerful. That is just amazing.
Yes,
and let me also say to my audience, for those who are listening, because you mentioned Jesus coming from the Moabite lineage, and I want to affirm that is in fact true. If you study the genealogy as Matthew explains it, you will find Moabite and Canaanite and Egyptian and Ethiopian even lineages within the bloodline of Jesus Christ. And so while many want to focus on his Hebrew bloodline, what makes Jesus who he is the fact that he has our bloodline within him, and that we can then claim him. We can't let the white folks steal Jesus from us. That would be an injustice on our people.
That's
Dear
right.
Brother Lawrence, that's the major reason, when Brother Martin Santail brought up those 18 missing years.
Yes.
See, the knowledge, we're Muslims through and through, but we teach in our practice of Islam that if Jesus did not conquer death, there'd be no salvation for man. But the significance of these 18 missing years. So also is another thing, the knowledge of Jesus. My brother, Dr. Wesley Muhammad of the Nation of Islam was on a show recently where he actually said these things. The knowledge, the real knowledge of Jesus rules the world today.
That's right.
It rules the world today, whether people believe it or not. It rules the world today. But what Prophet Drew Ali did was give us back our narrative, our forefathers' narrative on Jesus.
That's powerful, brother. Brother Chris, did you want to say anything in regards to that as well?
Praise Allah, because thinking about the journey of a lot of our people, if you look at the AME churches and the history of what our people been through in our journey here in America, those 18 missing years of the life and works of Jesus, give us a lot of insight onto why it was removed.
There
you think about, when, because you remember when I was in school and I was studying history and, I was learning certain things because my background was in the church, and then when you study and you're like, well, I look at Matthew chapter 1 and you think about some of those great fathers to which Jesus came, Abraham, Boaz by Ruth, Jesse, King David, Solomon, Hezekiah, and Joseph by Mary. And then, you learn about some of these people when you're growing up, but then it doesn't hit you when you're like, well, what about the Moabites? We always hear about the Canaanites, but what about the Moabites? But then Ruth, and you're like, Ruth the Moabitess. And you're like, wow, all right. So then you start putting things together, and then I remember I put that together when I was in school, and I was like, man, they lied on them. I was like, man, they lied on them. They lied on Jesus. And then you go to this anger state. And then the thing about what Prophet Noble Ali was saying with my grand sheik, the camel walk on my grand sheik was what he brought that was so remarkable is that through all that anger, he taught us that we need to learn to love instead of hate. And he taught us that Jesus was love made manifest so man could comprehend. So, we now, and then he taught us how we needed a pattern for our lives and how we love to follow and not to lead. So now he left his footprints clearly cut and he walked away. He lived the way. That's why the original people who was following him was calling themselves the way.
That's right.
Because, the footprints was clearly cut so they could all see and go the path and stay away from the wrath. But, it's about us activating that. And the main difference, because a lot of, even in Islam, a lot of jewels are missing. A lot of secret things are missing about Jesus, like the crucifixion. We're taught that when the will of man and the will of Allah are one, the resurrection is a fact. Now, if you go around to Saudi Arabia saying stuff like that, and you saying you Muslim, they're looking at you like, hold on, I don't know what's going on with that. But, when they talk about, when you talk to them about the ascension, even with Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, going to the Dome of Rock, and he ascended. And you study the prophets of olden times. Isaiah ascended. All of the prophets ascended.
Yes.
And then he gives us the ministry of death, which we know that is a difficult thing for people to minister because it's like you're looking for, what can I tell these people who are grieving? He gives us so many things to work with is because what Jesus brought for our people was like he brought us the key to life, death, and the resurrection of the dead.
That's right.
So then now our high science is being taken from us by the people who have colonized us and then is used to oppress us and keep us down. So then now when we wake up, we got to wake up in love and then rule it the right way because how we fell off was through sin and disobedience. And then through sin and disobedience, the prophet taught us that every nation suffers slavery due to the fact that they did not honor the creed and principles of their forefathers. So when that goes back to nationality, because what Prophet Noble Ali taught us and brought us our nationality, he taught us that nationality was the foundation of mankind.
That's right.
So and then we look at Marcus Garvey, who said a people without history of their nationality is like it was like a tree without roots. So we were at a state of mind, in a state of misery, where the prophet say he went to the south and examined the conditions of our people. So he knew where we was at, and he said, if you had race pride and love your race, join the Moorish Science Temple of America. Then you will have power to redeem your race.
Mm.
Peace.
Peace. No, absolutely. I teach my people all the time. You can't experience resurrection power without experiencing death. By definition of resurrection, there must be a death and an overcoming of said death to now walk in resurrection power. So we are definitely in agreement there, 1,000%. Yeah, I see what I got up here. Marcus Garvey, I'm a fan.
Sir.
So, so you already know.
Yeah.
So let me also say this now for those who are listening. We have Muslim, then we have Muslim. So that's Muslim, 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 Moslem. Now, I want to know, is this a semantic thing, or is there in fact a difference between one versus the other? And I kind of have an idea of the answer because I do have a copy of the so-called Circle 7 Quran that I do read once in a while. But this is for the sake of my people. I would like for you guys to answer the questions. There's a difference between a Muslim, Muslim, and a Muslim, Moslem.
There's essentially, the short answer to that is that there's no difference. It's a semantic issue. What you're dealing with here is it's like comparing Chinese to English, right? There's translation, and then there's what's called transliteration. Transliteration is based on how something sounds. You see what I'm saying? So, and then you have different systems of what's called romanization. In other words, when I write a word that doesn't quite correspond letter to English, right? I have to spell it in the way in which it sounded. And so there's systems of romanization, right? Okay. So an older romanization for the word was Moslem. And then when you see Muhammad, it's Mohmmed, right? Later, the romanization that became popular is Muslim. Muhammad, Muhammad. Let's take the Nation of Islam. You see Muslim, Muslim. Well, in their older lessons and older literature in the 30s and the 40s, they said Muslim, Moslem. You see? And then the last thing I'll say to that is this. In, our language, it's a Latin base, also it's a Latin-based language. Exchanging the C and the G or the O and the U doesn't change the meaning of the word.
Correct.
So the O and the U can be interchangeable, just like Negro and Necro. Black according to science means death. See that?
Yeah.
You see? So yeah, they could be exchanged.
Absolutely. Thank you. I wanted to clear that up for my listeners because what I've learned is most of our fights is over semantics. I am one who personally I delve with concepts. Whatever you want to call it, you can call it whatever you want, but what's the concept in which you're trying to convey, and then the language of that concept. So then, as long as the word matches the concept in which you're trying to convey, I'm cool. I'm not going to fight over semantics. We don't have time for that.
Even with deity, like what you just said, right?
Yeah.
And in English, the appendage that allows me to go from one room to another is a door.
Yes.
But in Spanish, they would call it la puerta. Are we going to argue over which word is right, or we just going to use the door?
Exactly.
So we don't trip over what you may call the Almighty, Eternal, and Incomprehensible.
Yes. Right.
We all realize we're talking about the same thing.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm with that 100%. With my particular flock, I stress that 1,000 times when we're dealing with. I use the term Most High, but it's the transcended one, the one who is above all.
Come on, brother.
The origin of all, and we are in fact descendants of that one.
Come on.
And
that's right.
When we understand that, it automatically brings a certain level of peace, or as y'all would say, a certain level of Islam to us. And so I have many Muslims call me a Muslim. They say, hey, brother, you might say you're a Christian, but you're a Muslim just because of the way you think and how you operate. And I take it as a compliment. I don't reject it whatsoever, not even a little bit.
To reject it and to see it as opposition is to have a crusader mindset.
Y'all hear that? I want my listeners to hear that so that they don't get offended. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the flag, because the flag, once again, I know a little bit, but I want my listeners to understand the I guess, how ancient the flag is, the power of a flag, the meaning even of the flag, and I'll even connect that to the importance of nationality. That's really where I want to go, especially for our people. I don't think enough of us understand the importance of nationality, and I know that that is an emphasis that the Moorish Science Temple will, for lack of a better term, will preach. It's the nationality has to be connected to a nation, a government, a political structure, a flag, a land, et cetera, and so can we build just for a little bit on what is nationality, how important is it, and also within that conversation break down the flag.
Go ahead.
Islam. Great question. And it kind of connects back to when you were talking about Morocco, and I want to clear that up. First off, when you think about Morocco getting its independence in 1956, our Prophet Noble Ali, brought us our flag here when he established the Moorish Science Temple of America, the red flag with the 5-point green star in the center. So, and it's not to be confused with the flag of the Moroccan flag. It's a different flag. The flag of Morocco has a border around the 5-point green star in the center. So when we think about nationality, in our people, that involves our culture and our heritage. So if you think about the definition, nationality is the quality of the character that rises from the fact of a person belonging to a nation or a state. So, when it came to our people in this nation, we were born here in America. That's why we are Moorish Americans. So that's our citizenship. Our forefathers were ancient Moroccans. So, that's what goes to our national descent name. Going back to who we are, and how someone could be born in Jamaica, but their national descent could be Chinese, but politically their citizenship is Jamaican. And you see this goes along a lot of times in many different nations. But the problem is European psychology. We were talking about semantics. What someone might call themselves or identify themselves can be used interchangeably as far as ethnicity, race, and nationality. Here in America, you had what was known as a hyphenated American movement, where you had a lot of immigrants who were still clinging to their nationality. So they would teach their children, you're German American, you're Irish American, you're Italian American. Political division and to make this systemic process of racism and to control and to continue perpetuate a narrative that will basically make people feel inferior by you saying everyone needs to cling to white. So you get those who say, well, I don't know who I'm just white. Right? Because I'm white and I'm American. And then you have those who say, all right, we're just going to cling to those. Yeah, well, I'm black American. So now we're playing the race game. And once you have people playing the race game, you have to deal with the consequences that come with it, which is living a lie.
You go.
Because the great God didn't make a black or white people. No true and divine record can show me where a black man or a white man has been recognized amongst the nations of the earth. So we think about the significance to it as us being Moorish Americans is that ours was taken away from us, and it's documented. October 14th, 1774 in Philadelphia. See, the Moors, we commemorate our forefathers who had their nationality stripped from us every year, because that was where they had a meeting at Carpenter's Hall, and these founding fathers made sure that this was a social action where they were committed to a social oath to say, hey, don't call them that anymore. Make sure you call them black. Make sure you call them Negro, colored, anything but more. Take it out the textbooks. Take it out, wherever you see it at. Don't call them that. Don't let them read. Because they might find out who they are. And once they find out who they are, we can start to try to control our narrative. in the way we teach our children. Because now when they ask us where we're from, we don't have to give them the slave narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because of slavery, we really don't know. And that's where, so now they say, oh, well, we have the genealogy test. We can go get the blood test. And this is where, Brother Lawrence, you familiar. I was talking about this in school before they even came out with the test, that they played us.
Yeah.
They had us. They didn't teach us about neo-colonialist African movements. They didn't teach us about the Berlin Conference. So then now we're running around thinking we 44% Nigerian and we 20% Cameroonian because we took a blood test. It's an insult to our forefathers.
That's an insult.
Because we're saying that our people didn't move anywhere. Our people didn't go anywhere. We just stayed put until the Europeans came and got us. That's how the prophet came and addressed the European psychology in the way we thought about ourselves. Because he said, if I can get you to think, you can save yourself. And then he told us, he said he brought everything it takes to save a nation. Now back to our flag. When he gave us our flag, that's when he told us we now have a nation. See, it was a parade. See, the prophet was in the papers all the time in Chicago. He was in the Chicago Defender regularly. The prophet had a parade for the Moors. And when he held that parade, he told us this is when he gave us back our nationality.
That's right. I wanted to, that was, first of all, thank you for that, brother. That was very powerful answer and response. All I'll add to that is this. And again, borrowing something from an earlier conversation I've had with Brother Simon Santerville, that he said, core American values dictates that every American has two flags. That includes Native Americans. If they're an American citizen, their origin was their former tribe. See how that works? So in the old world, to be an Italian citizen, it was based on blood, ethnicity. You got to be Italian, right? Old world. New world, you have to believe and adopt an idea. And that's the social compact. That's the social compact. The idea is e pluribus unum. One nation composed of members of old world nations. So what's the prerequisite? You got to be able to say where you came from to be a contributor to American society. You see what I'm saying? Or to be recognized as a contributor to American society. And this recognition is social. It's not legal. It has legal implications. How does it have legal implications? Because the people making the laws and the people involved in politics are already socialized a particular way about the word black. They're already socialized a particular way about the word white. You see how that works?
Yes, sir.
So there's no need for it to be codified literally. It's implied with legislation. It's a social recognition we're talking about because the Constitution is a social document.
Wow.
And so the prophet said, we have to do this to answer up to the constitutional standard.
Wow. Man, brother, you just dropped a gem because it explains now the issue among so-called black people when we speak. Most so-called black people, if you ask them where they're from, their response is, I don't know.
Correct.
I'm from Mississippi. I'm from North Carolina. And if the ideology of America is contingent on you knowing where you came from, adopting two flags, then just by the ideas of America, there is nothing you can contribute because you have no idea where you came from. You're not a part of the many that's combining into the one. You're lost. You're lost people. And so just with that understanding alone, the treatment, I'm not going to say the treatment is just because it's still unjust treatment, but there's an understanding that comes as to why they treat us like we're nobodies, because from the ideology of America, you don't know where you come from. So how can I treat you better than you would treat yourself like you're nobody because you don't know where you come from. You don't have an ethic. You don't have a culture. You don't have a system. And while so-called black people are trying to build a culture here in America, hip hop being one of the main uses, but wasn't even fully respected. But even amongst hip hop, right? African Bambaataa, we're Zulu. He was still trying to connect the people back to something far more ancient than the Atlantic slave trade.
See how that works, brother? We are still today identified by a previous condition of servitude instead of honoring the honor of our forefathers and foremothers.
Mm-hmm.
You
That's
see,
powerful.
you almost paraphrased, Brother Martin. Didn't he pretty much paraphrase one of the prophet's public
He
addresses?
said, "Is what we're doing."
He said, the citizens of all free national governments, according to their national constitution, are all of one family bearing one free national name. Those who fail to recognize the free national constitution of their own government are classed as undesirables and are subject to any inferior name, mistreatment, and abuse that the citizens care to bestow upon them.
Wow.
That's what he
Wow.
said. That's what he said.
Well,
You know, the camel walk with my grand sheik, you hit it on the nail where it's we have to be accountable for what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what we're doing is still clinging to the names and the principles. So what Jim Crowism brought about with our people was a lot of disrespect, disgrace. You know, we've lived through it, and we see it because some people embraced the stereotype. Some people wanted to strive to be better citizens, and then what Prophet Noble Drew Ali taught the Moors was that the purpose of the Moorish Science Temple of America was to uplift all of humanity and teach the things necessary to make its members better citizens. So, you know, with us knowing that they came out with convict leasing laws and Jim Crow era laws that would just have people easily locked up for not working a job or changing jobs or not wearing farmer clothes or walking the streets too late, and then they would just be sold in convict leasing. A lot of people just said, all right, we're not going to follow laws and we're going to just live up to the stereotype. And you had some households and families that said, no, we're going to be upright and be model citizens and participate like they did immediately after Reconstruction when we took office. So, you know, I don't know if people are familiar with the original Asiatic or so-called black congressmen who immediately took the seats after the Civil War, because you had those ex-Confederates who were still, you know, up for charges of treason. And if they would have attempted, you know, they would have been hung for, you know, sedition and treason. So, you know, that's connected to the great program, as we call it in the Moorish Science Temple of America, as far as the nationality side. What we want to be able to get our people to be law abiders, where the prophet said, amends our acts and renew our ways, because we know we are the target of the criminal justice system. We see all the information out about the prison pipeline. Well, that's what, you know, we were working on in the Moorish Science Temple of America, and still are. We have initiatives within the federal prison system, and you know, trying to get people all set and right within knowing who they are and knowing that we can be upright, fearless, and independent, and follow our prophet.
Wow, that's so. Now, so let me ask you this: does one have to be, I guess, a part of the Moorish Science Temple in order to reclaim their nationality?